volunteer. But the first thing her friends and family will tell you is that she's never forgotten where she came from or who she's been fighting for. Hillary grew up in a middle-class home in Park Ridge, a suburb of Chicago. On a trip to Chicago with her youth ministry, Hillary got to see Martin Luther King Jr. speak. This sparked her lifelong passion for social justice. By the time she graduated Wellesley College, she had become a prominent student leader and elected by her peers to be the first ever student speaker at the commencement ceremony. After college, Hillary enrolled in Yale Law School, where she began dating one of her classmates, Bill Clinton. After law school, she went to work for the Children's Defense Fund, gathering stories about the lack of schooling for children with disabilities. On October 11, 1975, Hillary married Bill in a small ceremony in Fayetteville, Arkansas. As First Lady of Arkansas, she was a forceful champion for improving educational standards and healthcare access. Bill was first elected president in 1992 and re-elected in 1996. As First Lady, Hillary tenaciously led the fight to reform our healthcare system. In 1995, she led the U.S. delegation to Beijing to attend the UN Fourth World Conference on Women, despite being told by some officials not to go. In 2000, Hillary was elected to the U.S. Senate, and after 9/11, pushed the Bush administration to secure $20 billion to rebuild New York and fought to provide health care for responders who were at ground zero. In 2008, Hillary ran for president, but when she came up short, she gave a powerful speech thanking her supporters and threw her support behind then-Senator Barack Obama. When President Obama asked Hillary to serve as his Secretary of State, she put aside their hard-fought campaign and answered the call to public service again. After 8 years of Bush foreign policy, Hillary was instrumental in the effort to restore America's standing in the world. Even former Republican Secretary of State Henry Kissinger said she ran the State Department in the most effective way I've ever seen. Hillary ran for president in 2016 and became the first woman to earn a major party's nomination for president, garnering 66 million votes. In her concession speech, she called on supporters to never stop believing that fighting for what's right is worth it. Inspired by the widespread activism after the election, Hillary founded Onward Together, an organization designed to encourage people to organize, get involved, and run for office. Ladies and gentlemen, we salute Hillary Rodham Clinton.
I'm so happy to stand here with Secretary Clinton. I have been honored to sit in her office when she was Secretary of State. I've been honored to be in her presence several times, and I don't care what the electoral votes say. She's my president.
From your lips to God's ears. I am deeply honored to be here, to be part of this event. Thank you. Well, it's mutual. It is mutual. I want to thank Kathleen. As she said, she and I have been comrades on many issues, and I'm grateful to you and to Dr. Steele and to SCLC for this honor. It means a lot to me. Thank you.
Well, this is the Realizing the Dream Award, and we realize that she's realized many, many dreams, and that is the epitome of an empowered woman, and we are so proud of her. On behalf of SCLC.
Here, here we go. Let me put that right here. Kathleen, come right over. Here we go.
She'll hold it for us.
Yeah. Just hold that. Yeah, thank you. You know, Kathleen and Charles have been good friends and supporters over the years, and it has meant the world to both Bill and me to have your friendship and your advice as we have all tried to realize the dream, a never-ending quest. And so I thank SCLC, and I want to recognize the other honorees. It's a great pleasure to be in their company. I especially want to say a word about my friend, Congresswoman Lucy McBath. She is doing an amazing job, and she will need your help and your support to make sure she keeps doing that job in the future. And to Charles Johnson, thank you for sharing your story, for introducing your beloved wife, Kira, to the rest of us. To tell her story as a way of keeping faith with her, the life she led, the family that you both created. I want to underscore what Charles said, because this doesn't make the headlines. But he is absolutely right. We have a maternal mortality crisis in this country. And as Charles explained, we spend all this money on health care. But you look at the numbers, and we are nowhere near the top in keeping mothers and babies alive. And it's especially tragic and wrong that black women are more likely to die than white women. In addition to Kira's story, some of you might remember Serena Williams' story. After giving birth, this world-class athlete knew there was something wrong and kept trying to tell the medical staff. And she had the best medical care, just as Kira did. And just like Kira, she kept being put off. And she kept going back time and time again to say, I know there's something wrong. I have a tendency toward blood clots. I know that's happening. Her story turned out differently than Kira's. But just imagine if she had been left to wait a few more hours, like Kira had been left. So I am so grateful to Charles and to the organization that he has started for Kira, for moms, and for relentlessly pushing the legislation through the Congress and getting it signed by the president, and now it has to be implemented. It is a lot harder to save mothers and babies when you don't have access to health care. It is also hard even when you have access and nobody's listening to you. It is absolutely beyond my understanding that this state that we are in today has not expanded Medicaid to take care of the hundreds of thousands of low-income mothers and their babies who need health care and should be able to access it. So Charles, thank you. It cannot get any easier, but we are grateful that you share that story with us. Dr. Ritchie, thank you for serving as Master of Ceremonies. You know, as I sat here and thought about the SCLC and its storied history, Dr. King, it just made my heart swell that you're still at it, that you have not folded up your tent and disappeared, because you know what? We need you now more than ever. There is no doubt that the struggles that we face right now at this point in our history are as consequential as those that were faced back in the late 1950s when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. took the helm of this storied organization. And it is not a time to look backwards. It is a time to reassert our commitment to the future that will realize the dream, but to recognize that the work is never over. I think some of us were a little surprised that we'd have to be having the same conversations, arguing over the same points, but that is the hand we have been dealt. And the SCLC has to be a North Star in the continuing struggle for freedom and justice and equality. I think about Reverend Dr. Joseph Lowry, and I know that all of our prayers and thoughts are with him. I remember the last time I saw him about 3 years ago, and he was just as determined then as he was as a young man. If he can stay determined, if all of us who are on the other side of our lives can stay determined, then we have to do a better job of persuading young people to join this cause. There are so many noble fights to be waged, because the truth is that when our civil and human rights are being trampled on and marginalized every single day, the need for a just and humane society becomes even starker. The need for not only leaders, but foot soldiers. Just this week, we saw the president use his bully pulpit to pit Americans against one another, sending racist tweets meant to demean not only members of Congress, but all people of color, all women, and all immigrants. We are better than this, but we'd better start proving it and not just saying it. The idea that it is possible for some of us to be more American than others is an out-of-date notion that should have been left behind decades ago. I loved it when members of Congress started saying, well, I wasn't born in this country either. Am I less of an American than my fellow members of Congress? Well, of course, the answer is no. But that can't just be a battle fought out on Twitter. That battle has to be fought and won at the ballot box, which is the only place that matters. I was talking to Dr. Steele earlier because there's no doubt in my mind that there needs to be a mass mobilization. People need to get off the benches and come back into the arena. We have to do a much better job of convincing everyone of the importance of their vote and then standing up, as Stacey Abrams has done, to ensure that that vote gets cast and counted. And not to get distracted, my friends. You know, Toni Morrison reminds us, and think about this wisdom from one of our greatest writers. The very serious function of racism is distraction. It keeps you from doing your work. It keeps you explaining over and over again your reason for being. Think about it. It is a distraction, and it is meant to be a distraction. It is meant to fuel arguments on social media. It is meant to isolate and marginalize leaders. It is meant to discourage people, thinking that what can I do? It's just out of control. we cannot afford to be distracted. And we cannot afford to be divided. As Charles said, and as Lucy Macbeth reminded us, the strongest power on this earth is love. We have to recommit ourselves to love and compassion and empathy. We will have doors slammed in our faces. We will have eyes rolled at our rhetoric. We will have people dismiss and demean us. But at the end, standing up for those fundamental values is more important than scoring cheap political points. So I would hope that we keep the faith. We keep the faith in each other, in our country, and our God. We are, as I am fond of saying, stronger together. And we are constantly reminded of Dr. King's words that the time is always right to do what is right. So let us recommit ourselves to realizing the dream. And all the ways we can do that. You do not have to run for office, although I do highly recommend that it is a path. You realize the dream when you worship. You realize the dream when you organize. You realize the dream when you register. You realize the dream when you vote. And so I am grateful for this honor, but I have to tell you, none of us have realized the dream yet. But we can keep moving toward realizing it, just as we keep moving toward perfecting a more perfect union, if we are determined to stand against the forces of darkness, to be light warriors, and to go forth in the great tradition of SCLC to make God's work on this earth our own. Thank you all. Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh!
Dr. Lafayette.
Would Dr. and Mrs. Lafayette come to the stage, please?